All right. Good afternoon, everybody. In case you were curious or not reading the comments, that was Grover Washington Jr.'s Wine Light. For those of you that were with us last Monday, that was one of Tim McAllister's must listen to. And to be honest, after the way that was rolling, I don't know about you guys, but I'm having a typical Monday. But after that, I'm ready to rock and roll now. So let's go ahead and get rolling. Today, we're going to be talking about saxophones with Corkey Trevino. He's our Southwest regional sales manager. We also have Scott Campbell, back by popular demand. He's our woodwind / saxophone / flute / whatever product manager, coming to you from lovely Elkhart, somewhere, Indiana. Oh yeah, and those burping tree things too. He does those as well. So enough of me. Before we really kind of get rolling, I do want to thank everybody for a great week last week. I had a blast. We are working on an Artist Week Part 2. As soon as we can finalize a couple of our last guests, we should be able to kick that up probably the first week of May. So I hope everybody's doing well, staying safe, not losing your mind. And again, thank you for joining us. And let me turn it right over to Corkey. Corkey, it's all yours. There he is. Beautiful man.
Hey, how you doing, man? How you doing? So I want to thank everybody for taking some time with us today. And today we're going to talk about saxophones. Obviously, I'm a sax player, so I'm very excited about this particular category. So on our saxophones, we start with our step-up, which is the Lavoie saxophone, an entry-level pro. And the reason why I keep these two separated is that these are USA saxophones, and we'll explain that here in a bit. And then also our Selmer Paris saxophones. With our Selmer Paris saxophones with the Axos, the Series 2, the Series 3, and the reference. So we're going to start off with the Lavoie saxophone. So the Lavoie saxophone, Lavoie means the voice in French. So give it a little nod to the Selmer Paris line, made in Taiwan, and it has a lot of different pro features on this instrument. What Scott's going to be doing is Scott's going to be talking about the specifics of what makes that instrument, what makes that sound on that particular instrument, and then also from a player's point of view. And so, Scott, if you want to take it over from here to talk about Lavoie.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Corkey, you described it really well in that. Sorry, I'm going to adjust my headphones here. Let me know if anything gets scratchy or anything like that. You described it really well, wherein these instruments they have all the pro specifications. The history of the Lavoie is interesting. You know, we came out with the Lavoie years and years ago, the Generation 1, and now we have the Lavoie 2. And I mean, they've improved by light years. So the Lavoie 2, it's a completely redesigned bore design, better ergonomics. The neck is much more improved. And these really have all the specifications of any professional saxophone. And really, they compete neck to neck to any of the other competitors' pro horns that are made in Taiwan. So there's many other companies that have professional level Taiwanese made saxophones. And we haven't fully gone to that with the exclusion of the 40 series, because our Lavoie has been made in Taiwan, and it started out as our intermediate line of instruments. And then, of course, we're Conn-Selmer. We have our professional artist line of professional saxophones, which are Selmer Paris and Yanagasawa. But, you know, they have high F sharp, they have fully ribbed construction, they have blue steeled springs. The bell, it's a hand hammered one-piece bell. Pisani Pro pads. I mean, everything that you'd want in a pro horn, these horns have them. But because we have what we consider our pro horns, we keep these in that step up category in your dealer confidentials. But I've gone out and I've visited dealer after dealer after dealer doing trainings, and I'm sure some of you are on the call now, where I've gone in and done some trainings, and at the end they'll ask me to actually compare, so I'll play a competitor's professional Taiwanese horn with our Lavoie Taiwanese horn, and they really do compare neck to neck, and often people prefer our Lavoies above competitors. So when you're talking to people who are interested in a step-up horn, but the price point of the Selmer Paris maybe is a little too high or a lot too high. These Lavoie instruments are really incredible. As a performer, I would be very comfortable going and performing on these instruments. I could go play a recital tonight on one of these horns and without thinking twice about it. They're really great instruments.
I know the Barry sax has done really well in Texas. A lot of schools are accepting it, and it, again, a great price.
Yeah, and there's a lot of bronze content within the metal on that instrument, and it just gives it a dark, rich, deep sound. Again, the ergonomics are great, and yeah, the Barry is very popular.
The next instrument that we're going to talk about is the 40 series. So the 40 series is a hybrid horn in the sense that the body is made in Taiwan, but the neck, you can actually get two different options. The first option is with the Selmer Paris neck, which the neck is very important in the sound of the saxophone. And the second option, which is the Warburton neck. And so Scott will talk a little bit about the body and about the neck and go from there. Scott?
Right. So again, I mean, we had talked about how these Lavoie horns are really professional level horns, but that we consider at a intermediate or step up price point. Price wise for a Lavoie competes very closely with the new pricing that came out in January 2020 with the Yamaha 480, for example. But there is still that area of that $3,000 area for a professional entry level saxophone. And so we thought, well, what could we do to offer our consumers something that would fit within that price point? Because there is a price jump once you get into the Selmer Paris and the Yanagisawas. And so what we did is we made some adjustments to the body, some improvements by adding some key unique features. But the biggest feature of all is that we collaborated, and this is the first full collaboration with Selmer Paris in designing this instrument. So it comes with a Selmer Paris neck. Now, something that I want to talk about here is, for example, the body of these horns and the Lavoie, it's based off of the Series 2 design. So it's a Series 2 bore. We have adjusted the ergonomics in ways that we feel have improved them a little bit, especially the way the palm keys sit. The angles, and they sit a little bit higher up. But in terms of tone, what they do, what's done on the Taiwanese bodies is that they're torch annealed, whereas the Selmer Paris neck itself is oven annealed. And so this is something that a lot of people don't know. So for example, we talk a lot about Bach, that Bach sound, and a lot of that Bach sound, and I'm the woodwind guy, so I'm not the expert in the room when it comes to Bach, but what is done with our Bach instruments is that helps produce that sound is the annealing process. So where we take our Bach instruments and we put them in an oven that's underground, and we have a special annealing recipe. How fast it heats up, how long it's held for at a certain temperature, and the rate at which the temperature is decreased. Selmer Paris does the exact same thing in their annealing process on their saxophone. So when we're looking at this, what I would call a hybrid horn, meaning a Selmer Paris neck with our Taiwanese body, is that Selmer Paris neck goes through that same annealing process that's done on the Selmer Paris horns. And what's also really interesting is that, Henry Selmer, who's right here, that's Henry Selmer right there. He was working on this at almost the exact same time Vincent Bach was working on these same processes. So I don't know if these two guys met up at the World's Fair and had a beer together, but it's very interesting that two lead manufacturers, continents apart, were developing a very similar process at the same time. And it really influences the way these horns are made. It takes longer. It takes longer to go through the process of putting them into these ovens. and go through that entire recipe than just to torch and anneal it, but it does have an impact on the sound. So this hybrid instrument really is a great way to get a professional sound. Obviously, the closer you come to the player, right? So the more of an effect that component's going to have on the sound. So for example, the neck will have more of an effect on the sound than the body. The mouthpiece will have more of an effect than the neck, and then the reed will have more of an effect than the mouthpiece will. The closer you get to the player as a woodwind player, the more of an effect it's going to have. So by putting that professional Selmer Paris mouthpiece, it just bumps the whole tonal characteristics of that sound to the next level. Corkey, anything to add?
Well, the next is the Warburton neck. Let's talk a little bit about the Warburton neck and what this does to the sound and what options a person has with this one.
Right. So after we came out with the 40 series, the AS42 and the TS44 with the Selmer Paris neck, we also created the option of the Warburton. And some people are, especially the brass guys, are really familiar with Terry Warburton and the great work that he's done on accessories there. So what he realized is that, so this is a standard Selmer Paris neck. And if you can see here, there's a ring on top. So that's called the neck ring. And I'll have it face the camera like this if you can see. And you can see that it's a little blunt on the end. And the neck ring, it's actually not part of the neck pipe itself. We solder that neck piece onto the neck. And the shape of this ring has a huge impact on the resistance of the instrument, on the way it plays, on how dark it is, how bright it is, the resistance that one has. So he realized that by messing with that neck ring, you can really influence the way the horn plays. And so if you have a look, this is a Warburton neck, and you can have a look at that neck ring. You can see how it's beveled out. And I mean, even by looking at it, you can see that there's going to be a lot less resistance to that. And by looking at it, especially when we compare to the Selmer Paris, I mean, one almost thinks it's more set up for jazz. And this initiator is, that's very much a jazz initiator in terms of how it's beveled out and free flowing like that. So he thought, well, that's really cool. Well, in addition to messing with that neck ring, how about we get past the 19th century and we start using something other than cork? And so that's where he started to work with these rubber gaskets or O-rings. And there's several other manufacturers, like for clarinet mouthpieces, that are using those as well. And they're quite handy. I mean, they really are. They hold the instrument great, the mouthpiece. And if it's not holding it more snug enough, then you can beef up your O-ring and get a thicker O-ring. And then also through Warburton, you can actually change these initiators out. So through him, he has several different options. Ours just come with one initiator that we feel works really well with the instrument, but you can experiment with the other initiators that he has to get different sounds out of that. So that's the main idea behind the Warburton neck, and that's another option. And we have a lot of great players that really like this, like Professor Meggs. His main horn is a Mark VI, but I think his next choice in newly manufactured instruments is the Warburton neck on the AS42. Another outstanding artist that loves the 40 series, but with the Selmer Paris neck, is Jim Snydero. Jim Snydero is head over heels for the 40 series. We've done artist selects with him, and we'll put out all the horns, Selmer Paris horns, the Selmer USA horns, everything. And every time he comes back to that 40 series, and he just loves that horn, and said that if he were to buy a new horn today, that's what he would buy, is the 40 series. That's what he has right now. So he has his Mark VI that he's been playing on for decades, that kind of, your horn becomes part of you. But he plays on the 40 series a lot. And especially when he goes out and does his clinics, he plays on his AS42.
Not only that, but it also has some neat finishes that are unique to this series that are not on a Selmer Paris. For example, the unlacquered version or a black nickel with silver keys. So a lot of finishes that you would associate with jazz playing.
Yeah, that's right. So they have a lot of great finish options because that is popular in the saxophone realm. And then in addition to that, something I forgot to mention is it does come with a Selmer Paris mouthpiece. So that's a nice addition as well.
So next we're going to talk about the true Selmer Paris horns, the full blown versions. What is the secret sauce on the Selmer, and what people are looking for and what players are looking for?
Right. So let's talk about the DNA of a saxophone, of really any wind instrument. So the DNA, those things that make up the characteristics of the instrument is, one is the bore dimension. If you mess with the bore dimension, you're going to mess with the identity of that instrument. The next thing is the material that it's made out of. If you start messing with the material, then you're going to mess with how that instrument responds, sounds, and feels. For example, the copper content, the zinc content, the thickness, those types of things. And the third is the manufacturing process. When you start messing with the manufacturing process, you're messing with the DNA of that instrument. For example, what we just talked about, torch annealing versus oven annealing. You know, when you start messing with those processes, you're messing around with the identity or the DNA of the instrument. And a lot of people don't realize this, but every currently manufactured Selmer Paris saxophone, all of their altos and their tenors, all use a Mark VI body tube. So all of these body tubes on the Axos, the Series 2, the Series 3, and the Reference, all of their body tubes, you know, from this part just above the bow all the way to where the neck goes in, they're all made on Mark VI mandrels. Now, things have changed since then, lots of improvements. Obviously, to the ergonomics, there's been improvements. Tone hole placement, there's been some changes. The tone hole heights have remained the same, but the necks, the bows, and the bells, all adjustments to improve response, to improve intonation have all happened, but all of them use that identity of Selmer Paris, which is that bore dimension of the body tube. There's one time where we deviated from that, and that was with the Mark VII. Now, the Mark VIIs, they get a bad rap a lot of the times, but they were great instruments. I really feel that they were ahead of their time, but they were a different bore design with a brighter, edgier sound, and the market wasn't ready for that, and so they quickly went back to the Selmer Paris Mark VI bore design. So that's what's on all the horns today, and the same manufacturing process for all of them in terms of how they're created, how they're annealed, all those things.
As a matter of fact, the next horn that we'll be talking about, the Series 2, that's been around a lot longer. The 80 series has been a lot longer than the Mark VI has been, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So the Series 2, and that's what this is right here. This is my daily driver, if you will. The Series 2 has been around for going on 34 years. So it's been the longest production professional saxophone in the history of saxophones. And for that reason, it's the most popular professional saxophone in the world. The Series 2 is really the epitome of the next generation of the Mark VI, if you will. It's the current Mark VI, where they took that original design and just made improvements to it. Do you want to talk about some of the features, Corkey?
Yeah, again, with this horn, you have a full ribbing construction on there, so it adds more mass. So the horn plays a little bit darker. Does have a brass ring on the bell. And so these are the things. So, but this particular horn is considered the darker of the horns. But it's also right in the wheelhouse of, you know, sort of like our box strat trumpets, where it's right in the wheelhouse, where that's the sound everybody wants. Not too dark, not too light, just right in there.
Right. Or as a saxophonist would say, the box strat is a lot like our Series 2.
Correct.
No, so that's exactly right. And a lot of people aren't familiar. I mean, a lot of instrumentalists are familiar with it, but some, especially some of the sales team, may not be. So ribbing is a really important concept within saxophone manufacturing. And it'll probably be hard to show you guys exactly what it is, especially because my instrument is one color. But if you can see right here, you can see a plate of metal that's soldered to the body tube. So that plate of metal runs most of the length of the body tube, and that's called ribbing. And then the posts are then soldered onto that ribbing, and the keys are connected to the post. So like what Corkey was mentioning, that ribbing, this is a fully ribbed design, meaning there's ribbing the full length of the body tube, more or less. That really adds a marketing spin on that, as it makes it very durable and strong. And yes, it does, but a lot of it is because it adds more mass to the instrument, which gives it a darker, richer sound. It adds a bit what we call positive resistance. In addition to that, so that's a heavyweight construction with the fully ribbed construction, and it also has a heavyweight bell. So the bell is thicker on the Series 2. Then, like Corkey mentioned, it has the brass wire rim in there as well. Also the neck, and I don't have a Series. Well, one second. I have a tenor. Sorry, I didn't plan to go into this too much, but this is a tenor, Super Action 80 tenor neck. And sorry, it's an older. Again, this is my personal driver. It's from the 80s. But you can see here the bracing on the bottom is a heavyweight bracing here. That influences the resistance. Then it has this badge on the front as well that says Super Action 80. Now they say Series 2, but so it has a heavier weight construction to the neck as well.
The next horn is the Series 3. And so with this horn, they wanted to have a horn that was a little bit faster responding, a little bit quicker, a little bit more in tune to itself. Claude DeLong was one of the gentlemen that helped design this horn. And playing modern classical saxophone literature requires a lot of jumping back and forth. And so they needed something that played a little bit quicker. So going the opposite route of lighter and quicker. And Scott will talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So Corkey, Claude DeLong, he joined the faculty at the Paris Conservatory as the professor of saxophone in 1988. And then just several months after that, in 1989, he became the chief acoustic consultant for Selmer Paris, which that position was formerly held by Marcel Mule. And there's Marcel Mule right there. So he's the one who helped design the Mark VI. Claude DeLong, in turn, helped design the Series 3. And as you mentioned, Corkey, the contemporary repertoire at that time was very demanding. And especially in the late 80s, early 90s, Claude was working on music, and I think some of which was by Christian Loba, that was extremely soft dynamics the entire time. Lightning fast technique, like you mentioned, large leaps, but all at almost pianissimo levels. And so he really needed an instrument that would just respond very easily. And so that's what they went about to do. And so by doing that with the Series 3, and feel free, I'm trying to watch some of the chats and stuff, but let's make sure to keep track of that. I want to make sure to ask any really pertinent questions as people have them. If we could go back, Corkey, to the Series 3. Right. So to the Series 3, what they first started with was with the neck. So it's a lighter weight construction. You can see here, there's a smaller brace on the neck itself. In addition, they removed the badge on the front, so they reduced some of that material. Now this is a sterling silver neck, so that's why the finish is different. But in addition to that, they actually changed the conicity of the neck tube itself. So this is actually longer and more narrow than the Series 2 neck. Oh, sorry. So there's the small brace right there. And then you can see they removed the badge. So the neck tube itself is more narrow and it's longer. And what that does or did is it brought down the upper register. So on a saxophone, high C sharp and above is traditionally sharper than the rest of the instrument. And by altering this neck, they were able to bring high C sharp and above down into pitch. In addition to that, to help improve some of the intonation, they added a patented C sharp mechanism. Now, again, this is my series 2 that I play on, but by pressing just high C sharp, which is no keys except for the octave mechanism, what it would then do is bring down what looks like as a donut key onto the C sharp tone hole, and then that would bring down that pitch on those upper registers. And then vice versa, when you're in the middle register, it vents that same key. So middle C sharp is usually a bit sharp. Sorry, I have some water on my keyboard. It would bring that into tune as well. So sorry, no. Middle C sharp is flat. It would bring that pitch up. My apologies. So vice versa. So the series 3, again, they made it respond more easily by working with the neck, play more in tune. And then in addition to helping the responses, they use what's called a mini ribbed construction. So there's still ribbing along the body tube, but there's simply less of it. Okay. So there's still parts that have ribbing, but it's just where it's necessary. And again, that was to help it speak more easily. In addition, the Series 3, it has a lightweight bell, and then they used nickel silver rim wire because it's a denser material that doesn't absorb vibration as much. So it can, again, help with that response a little bit more.
So the next horn is the reference horn, which I guess we could say they're top model, correct? A little bit more copper content, a little bit longer bell, going back to the old Mark VI sound, but without all the clink and clank from old keywork, putting modern keywork on there. Go ahead, Scott.
Right. You know, and what really stands to a testament of the Reference 54 is that it's so well accepted in both jazz and classical idioms. So they did, you know, Selmer pairs, people have asked for years and years, go back to, can you please remake the Mark VI? In fact, I was giving a lecture at the North American Saxophone Alliance conference a couple years back, and one of our competitors was there, a great guy, and he said, you know, we as saxophone manufacturers, not being Selmer, we all try to copy the Mark VI. We all have samples of Mark VIs that we try to reverse engineer and come out with. But he said, you guys are Selmer. You have the blueprints. You have the tooling. Why don't you just remake the Mark VI? And the answer is simple. We don't want to. We don't want to remake something from years and years ago. We want to move forward and not backward. But with that being said, there is still a market that wanted a lot of these key aspects of the Mark VI. And that's what the Reference 54 is. The Reference 54 is referencing 1954 with the Mark VI when it was released and taking some of the positive aspects of that, but really combining it with modern technology and modern manufacturing and all the things that we've learned since 1954. So with the Reference 54, we did go back to a fabulous Mark VI style neck. Now, the Mark VIs, with that neck, they have a tendency to play sharp in the upper register, as does the Reference 54, but it really gives it a nice, edgy, great sound. It can help facilitating going up into the altissimo register, but it gives it a nice, brilliant sound. In addition to that, we took a lot of the aesthetics from the old Mark VIs. For example, the spatula keys. Again, this is my Daily Driver Series 2, but the spatula keys have the more rounded, the more half circle spatula keys. Excuse me. You know, we have the traditional circular F sharp, chromatic F sharp key. Of course, there's no longer the teardrop with the Reference 54. It's again the pearl touch piece up there. Some of those aesthetic differences, but to create a horn that plays better than a Reference 54, or sorry, that plays better than a Mark VI, but still captures a lot of the essences of the Mark VI. And going back to when I was giving that presentation, it was great because we had a professor who was present And he had a Mark VI that I used in the demonstration that was made in 1954. It was a brilliant horn. He raised his hand and he said, you know, I really want to add on to Scott's comment. He said, I've had my personal Mark VI since 1954. My father bought it for me, and I absolutely love this horn. And it was a great Mark VI, really great playing horn. He said, but the horns up there, the current ones, he said, if I had the money today, I would buy. He really liked the Series 3. I would buy a Series 3 right now because it just blows my Mark 6 away. And they do. And that's the whole goal. But I mean, the Mark 6s are incredible horns, but we've come a long way since then, especially in terms of consistency and things like that and intonation.
Can you explain the other option on the Model 36?
Yes, yeah. And I want to clear up any kind of confusion as well with the finish options. So the alto is only available, the SKU number is 72, okay? That's our reference 54 alto. But the tenor is available in reference 54 and reference 36. The reference 36 is referencing the balanced action, which was released in 1936. So if getting away finish aside, just let's talk about the design of the instrument. The main difference between the tenor 54 and the tenor 36 is this part of the saxophone right here. So when we look at that bow to bell connection right in this area, it has a larger diameter there, and that's what gives that more spread, broad sound of those balanced actions. And that's the biggest difference between those. Now, the reference 54 tenors, the SKU number on that is 74. The first finish that they came out with was that matte vintage finish, which we still have. Now it's called 74. Now, the reference 36, when it was first released, it came out with the gold lacquer, okay? Now it's given the SKU number 84. Well, going forward, they added finishes. So the reference 54 was then available with a gold lacquer finish, and that became the 74F. And then the 84 was then released with the option of the vintage antique finish, and that was given 84F. So it's tricky, and if you were following, you'll realize that those two are mismatched, right? They're vice versa. So the 74 and the 74F are matte finish with lacquer, and the 84 and the 84F are lacquer with matte finish. So we've had that question come up a couple times, and we've actually had a couple dealers order the wrong finish by accident. So I just want to take an opportunity to kind of clarify that and why it happened. Unfortunately, we can't just change our SKU numbers, because once you create a SKU number, it's there forever. So
Yep. So the next one is the Axos. The Axos is kind of a hybrid. It's got some aspects of it that make it a faster playing horn, but then it also has full ribbing, like a Series 2. And Scott will talk a little bit about our Axos saxophone, which has become a very popular horn.
Right. Extremely popular. I mean, hugely popular. It's by far our fastest growing saxophone in the category the last year. So I love the Axos saxophone. It's incredible. So what it is the inception of it was Selmer Paris wanted to create a saxophone that was, in every sense, a Selmer Paris instrument that felt and sounded, had the durability and the quality and the core characteristics of a Selmer Paris saxophone, but that they were able to create at a price that was more easily attained, right? It was available at a more affordable price. So let's talk a little bit about why that was needed. So when you do handmade saxophones, so when we're hand-making saxophones, and it doesn't matter wherever you are in the world, overall, in general, these are speaking in generalities, the cost to manufacture a handmade saxophone, whether you're in Asia or Africa or Europe, the material is 20% of the cost, and the labor and overhead is 80% of the cost. So let's take that percentage and apply it to manufacturing saxophones in France. It becomes very expensive simply because the cost of labor. In addition to that, the way it's set up in terms of of the government and how taxes need to be paid for these factories. And I've spoken at length, especially with Claude DeLongla, about this. So I don't know. I have no idea what the exact, average is that our factory workers are paid over at the Paris factory. But say, for example, they were paid 3,000 euros a month. The factory then has to pay the government in taxes an additional almost 3,000 euros a month. So, I mean, you're almost having to pay twice the amount per employee because of the high rate of taxes. And so the impact of manufacturing a handmade saxophone gets very expensive over there. And that's a huge part of why the cost is what it is. But Selmer Paris does not, they've been at that facility since around 1928, 1929. They were there before then. I'm sorry, they were there before the 1920s, because their first model was the Model 22, and that was made there. So they've been making saxophones there since 1922. So with that being the case, they don't want to alter the way they're manufacturing, especially the key components of the instrument. So what they did is the axos, the neck, the body, the bow, and the bell, those are all made at the Paris factory. Just like the Series 2, the Series 3, the reference, all of them. In fact, the neck tube, the body, the bow, and the bell are almost identical to the Series 2 in terms of conacity of the neck. So those are the key parts that really make the sound, right? It's the bore dimension, and of course the annealing process. Those are the things that really create that rich, characteristic Selmer Paris sound. And then what they did, if you could go back to the slide, then what they did is they teamed up with a company that specializes in cold forged manufacturing. Now, cold forged manufacturing is really important because that's one of the foundation blocks to Selmer Paris manufacturing. So cold forging is, many of you probably know what that is, but for those of you who don't know, and I'm here, I don't have a mold, but I have some mad matter. I have kids here, so I'm working from home, so here's some mad matter. But for those of you who are familiar with a Play-Doh mold, okay? So a Play-Doh mold is you simply have a mold, and then you put in your Play-Doh, and then you put the top of the mold on it, right? And it comes down and it squishes it perfectly to shape, perfectly to form, exactly to specifications within thousands of inches. It's very precise. And then it has a little extra material that squirts out the edges that needs to be trimmed off, and they do that by hand. But what that does is it not only gives you very precise keywork, like extremely precise, but that process of cold forging, and the reason it's called cold forging is because it's done at room temperature. It's not heated up to 1,000 or 3,000 degrees. It's room temperature. What that does is it gives extremely hard material. So that's what gives Selmer Paris such hard keywork. Now, it was important that they find a manufacturer that specializes in the same process, because we don't want to jeopardize the integrity and strength of the keywork. So this company, they specialize in CNC manufacturing, and they also specialize in automation with CNC machines. So what that means is they can go in, do the cold forging, and then it can go in to a CNC machine that can then go and trim all the excess material away and have a perfectly shaped key at a much more affordable price. So that company, they were able to work with them, and it's all Selmer Paris controlled manufacturing, and they do the keywork. And if one looks at the saxophone, I mean, it's pretty easy to realize that, I mean, it's almost your 80-20 principle that, the part of the instrument that creates the sound, what really matters, is that neck, body, bow, and bell. The keywork is very important, but it doesn't impact the sound as much. So the body, all those important parts are made in the Paris factory. The keywork is made by the other factory, and they put it together, and the keywork costs a lot more to create. It's a lot more expensive to manufacture all this keywork than the neck, the body, the bow, and the bell. And by doing that, they were able to create a Selmer Paris instrument that's in every sense a Selmer Paris saxophone in terms of its sound quality and the way it feels. at a much more affordable price. You know, and as I've gone around to shows and worked with our artists, I'll have them play the Axos, and they love it. I mean, we have some of our top artists, for example, Timothy McAllister, who joined us last week, and they recommend this horn to those students who can't afford a Series 2 or a Series 3. They highly recommend it. And there's times, you know, I play in the office, when I'm in the office, I play during my lunch hour, and often I gravitate toward the Axos because the keywork feels so good, and it's a little bit less resistant. So I can be a little bit lazy about my playing. And so I gravitate towards that. So let me tell you a little bit about why it's less resistant. The reason is because this is designed for the person who is going into college, primarily, who can't afford a Series 2 or a Series 3, the person who's in high school, who's taking everything very serious and likely will go to college, or the hobbyist who plays on the side, who isn't a full-time professional saxophonist. And so they wanted to create an instrument that was a little bit more free-blowing. So what they did is they put a smaller brace on the neck, like the Series 3. They removed the badge, like the Series 3. Also, they altered the receiver here. They altered the receiver, reduced some of the metal so that there was a little bit less metal there, so it was a little bit more free-blowing. And then they solder the bow to the bell, and that helps it respond a lot more easily in the lower register. So those are some of the things that they did in that design, so it's a lot more free-blowing, a little bit more easier to play. It's always a balance between positive resistance and darkness of sound. You know, if you make it less resistance, it'll be a brighter sound. If you make it more resistance, it'll be a darker sound. So it's always trying to strike that balance perfectly.
Hey,
On
Scott.
this particular model, it's important to go ahead and say, you know, what current 2020 map is on this one.
Yeah, current 2020 map on this is 3349. So, I mean, to get a Selmer Paris horn at 3349 is just fantastic. And that's part of why, you know, sales have just, I mean, they've literally gone through the roof. We can't keep up with it.
Hey, just a quick question regarding the Axos. How does it stack up compared to other Saxes as far as, you know, holding up and playability and things like that out there in the sax world?
Are you talking about like in terms of mechanical reliability and like how long they last? Or?
Playability and all the above.
So I mean, if we're talking playability, the Axos blows away all the other saxophones in its class. I mean, by far. I mean, and I don't want to get into like manufacturing names, but you can take the other top competitors and just set it side by side, and the Axos just. And that's not just me playing it. This is the feedback I'm getting from saxophonists in the field and dealers. I mean, they're really, really incredible horns. And then in terms of their longevity, I mean, they're like any other Selmer Paris instrument. I mean, they're going to last a lifetime. They really will. The keys are all cold forged. And they feel great. Yeah, it's almost backfired a little bit where I've been out on these, like at NASA shows and things like that, and I'll have an artist play, and he'll play it. I said, wow, man, you know, that feels better than my Series 2. I said, oh, okay. Well, we don't want to go that far, but they're really good.
You know, Scott, one thing I think is important to explain to everyone is as we're talking about some of the other brands out there, a lot of times those other brands will get lost in the response that their horns are getting. You know, kids are playing on a beginner horn that's from a different company, and then they'll go over to their model of pro horn, and it plays very quick and very easy, but it lacks some of that color, because when you have a horn that's a little bit more resistant, you do get a little bit more color. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to what I was saying is, as manufacturers, we really do try to strike a balance between, in one hand, we have the responsiveness, how well the instrument responds. And then the counterpart to that is what we call dark or bright the instrument plays, or how thin or thick. You know, there's a lot of words and we take these words from art, but in short, it's how bright, how much treble it has in the sound, or how much mids and lows it has in the sound. I think that's a really good way to describe it. So when you reduce a lot of that material and you make an instrument that's very free-blowing, very easy to play, that's where you're going to have a very trebly sounding instrument. Okay, and you walk into band programs, and you know, I was down and taught in the Texas area for a long, long time. And that's where you have the band directors, giving the saxophone section the hand, just because it's bright and it can be obnoxious. Where if you really do strike a balance of having an instrument that has the right amount of resistance, it can give you a nice, rich, dark sound. And it's important that as dealers that we teach our consumers about this, especially younger students and their parents. I was helping at a step-up event at a dealer, and they had a nice room set aside with lots of different saxophones in there. So if a student wanted to do a step-up, they could go into this room with several different models in there, and it was very interesting. So, and I'll try to be as tactful as I can about this and careful, but they had the student was playing on a student instrument from a different manufacturer that's very free blowing, very easy to play. And then in that room that they were trialing, they had a Selmer Paris Series 2, a Selmer Paris Series 3. I believe there was a Yamaha Custom EX, and there may have been like an Eastman 52nd Street. And then there was a used horn of the same manufacturer that the student was on for their student horn, that same brand, but it was from the early 1980s, and it was like their very first pro model that company had ever come out with. And it was a very bright, very free-blowing instrument, very similar to what the student was actually playing on. So the student was playing and went through all these different models. And I just sat there as a fly on the wall because I was very interested in seeing how this process went down. And, he'd ask the sales representative did a great job asking her feedback and what she thought she liked. And then at the end just said, well, which one did you like the best? And she said, well, I really liked that one. And she pointed to that horn that was from the 1980s that had hardly any lacquer on it and was very bright, pretty much as bright as her student horn, and probably had the same amount of resistance. And there was no tonal improvement at all. There was none. And the sales associate simply said, okay, sounds great. Looks like we found your horn, wrapped it up, sold it to her. And that was the end of the day. And it was really disheartening to me because the parents came in and they spent extra money and time to get their student a better sound and a better experience in music. And they left the store on par with what they came in with. And that's part of our job, is that when a student comes in and they want to try something, you have to say, look, first off, let's talk about the keys. They're not going to feel exactly like yours. Okay. They're not going to feel exactly the same. And that's okay, because in 2 weeks, especially if you're practicing every day, you're going to be very used to the new keywork. So current manufacturers, everybody does a very good job with ergonomic design on saxophones. Every manufacturer has that figured out, mainly because everybody copied the Mark VI. but everyone's ergonomics are just fine. The next thing is that now when you play, you don't want to sound like your student instrument. You want to have a richer, darker sound. You want it to sound different. And it may be a little bit harder to play. You may have to blow harder. Imagine you're blowing up a balloon, that kind of air pressure in order to get the sound. So there needs to be some coaching along the way to help them realize what they're really getting into. But it's very unfortunate when a student comes in and kind of walks out with an instrument that's either on par or sometimes subpar to what they're currently playing on. And that's our job from the sales side to really make sure that we're helping our students.
Exactly. So as you can see, we have saxophones that fit all different price ranges, all different characteristics. If you wanted something that plays dark, if you wanted something that a little bit quicker, a little bit brighter, a little bit more, I hate saying copper sound, but a little bit more of a dark, smooth sound. No matter what medium of music that you're playing, we have it available for you. The last thing I wanted just to kind of touch on real quickly, I know we're running way over time, is the Claude DeLong mouthpiece. Just because we've had so much success with this in Texas, every single one that we've been able to get, we sell right away. And I wanted just Scott to just real quickly touch on what is the cool stuff on this new mouthpiece.
Right. And first, we do want to thank our dealers for all their patience. We know that it has been extremely challenging, and a lot of you have back orders on these, and we try to allocate and get them shipped out within a 24-hour period as soon as we get them in. Of course, going into manufacture something that has never been manufactured before can take longer than normal to get a flow, and that's what's going on at Selmer Paris right now. Well, before the pandemic. But so thank you for your patience with this. So this is the Selmer Paris mouthpiece. I do apologize as mine's a little bit dirty. Again, this has become my daily driver. This is the best classical saxophone mouthpiece on the market. It's phenomenal. So a brief overview, and I'm sorry that I've been so long-winded here. So the facing of this, which is the flat part that curves up, the facing of this mouthpiece is a C double star. Okay, that's this part right here. The inside of the mouthpiece, okay, what we call the chamber itself is a circular chamber, and it's the concept chamber, if you're familiar with the Selmer concept mouthpieces. The window, which is this part right here, the window of the mouthpiece is a Selmer soloist. And then if you look at the baffle here, it's a curved concave baffle, and it's very reminiscent of the vintage 1930s airflow mouthpieces. But what's so great about it, and I probably won't be able to, probably can't see it, but that curved baffle blends perfectly into that circular chamber, where the concept has a little bit more of a flat baffle going into a circle chamber. This is a curved baffle going perfectly into a circular chamber. And the last aspect of this is that it has a brass metal insert that goes from here inside all the way to about here. It's brass. And then we have a brass ring on the outside that's gold plated. And that really helps with the response of the instrument. Both in the louder dynamics, this mouthpiece can project hugely. I played a concerto at the Meyerson Symphony Center in Dallas, Texas. And it just, I mean, it projected fantastically, filled up the whole hall. But also it can respond so easily at the smallest pianissimo dynamics. Again, this was designed by Claude Delangla, so going back to what his design was with the Series 3 as well. So it can play so quietly and so evenly. But that's a quick overview of the Delangla mouthpiece. They're brilliant.
So here soon, Carlos Romero from the West Coast will be giving a session on Yanagisawa saxophones and mouthpieces and accessories, and then we will have a separate mouthpiece session for Selmer Paris mouthpieces. So we're going to open it up to questions for Scott or myself. Any questions?
Yeah, real quick, all things Yanagisawa will be a week from today. Just so everybody knows, that'll be next Monday. But Scott, I do have a question that was asked, since we're talking about, dealing with the step-ups and explaining to parents the sound. So in your experience, do you have a certain exercise or maybe passage that you suggest these students to play when they're trying out a horn?
That's a really good question. So it's important because every student will come in with a different toolkit of what they're able to play. It's important that when they do try out a new instrument, in my experience, I have them first try what they're currently playing on. So they bring in their instrument, they bring in their mouthpiece, and they bring in their reed, so that they can A/B play test. So I have them play the same thing on their current setup. And oftentimes, if we're talking about younger students, it's simply a scale. Okay, and there may be some coaching there talking about air support or embouchure, but I try not to get too much involved in a lesson side of things. I have to turn that part of my education hat off, and I have them just play a scale. Maybe it's a C major scale, 2 octaves, and then we get the different instruments that they're wanting to try out. We have them play the same thing on each one of those, and then we stand back and listen, and also have the parents stand back and listen. But so it depends on what the student is able to play, or you may have a college kid come in and he may play the Ibert concerto from memory. they know what to look for. But it's whatever they're comfortable with. But the main thing is I prefer that it be more lyrical. Okay, now the number one thing not to do is to show off your technique when you're trying out an instrument. It's to really, really develop and get a sense of what that sound is, and the response and how easily they go between octaves and things like that. But play something more lyrical. So if it's a student, I'll say play your scale. Usually they do it too fast. I say no. Now play it in half notes, okay, and have them play that scale in half notes. Yeah.
And most importantly is keep it simple. Don't give them too many options to look into when they're in their practice room trying out horns. Keep it to 2 or 3.
Right.
All right, and guys, we are getting close to our 1 o'clock cutoff. I do have another question. Just give me a second. I have to find it. I had it stuff there. It has to do with. Hold on. I'm so sorry. Crap. I'm trying. Too many questions. The pip on the Series 3, on the neck and on the body.
The what?
Hold on. I'm sorry, guys.
Chip, I have it here.
Go.
It's from Leroy, and he's saying he believes in the Series 3 specifically, but is there any reason why the octave pip on the body and neck strap ring are hard soldered or brazed instead of soft soldered?
Thanks, Sophie.
So he's asking why the octave pips are hard soldered instead of soft soldered, and the neck strap ring. Correct?
Yes, that was the question.
Okay. Off the top of my head, I do not know why they chose to hard solder those instead of soft solder, but I'm happy to find out. I will say that there will be a delay in response. Right now, Selmer Paris is closed, and so they're checking their emails once a week, but I'll shoot an email over to Florent Mio, my counterpart, and find out. So the octave pip on the neck and the neck strap ring, why those are hard soldered. I'm happy to look into that.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, gang. Again, I'd like to thank Scott Campbell, Corkey Trevino. Guys, thank you. Very informative. Really enjoyed it. Please join us again tomorrow at noon. We'll have a little lunch. We're going to talk strings with John Fulton. John is our Vice President of Sales for the Americas. He's got a killer string presentation ready to roll. And with that said, TJ, roll the tunes for just a second, and then we are out. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate you joining us.